So, you've heard from the customer, and as you said, we haven't broken it yet, which is good. So let's just look at some of the facts and figures behind the contracts that we've actually started to operate. We have 5 separate contracts in 5 separate geographies, and they are individual contracts between the Ministry of Justice and ourselves in respect of each of these. The lifetime contract value is made up primarily of fee for service. There is also a significant element of what we call third-party income, and that is basically income from other public and private sector bodies who basically need the services that we operate. And the largest of those customers is the National Probation Service, who buy many types of interventions, etc., from us. The final part of the contract makeup, which isn't reflected in the lifetime values, is the payment by results element, where both our cost of service and our reward for the cost of service is a totally flexible cost. So we look at what's working, we do more of that. We look at what's not working, we do less of that. It's very, very variable cost base around that element. Now, it's quite difficult sometimes to explain what the work of probation is. It's not a public service that's very well understood. And I'm taking a guess, but I would imagine that nobody in this room has had personal experience of it. That be right? We're not going to say you have if you have, are we really? Okay. Yeah. In order to sort of really communicate the types of things that happen in probation, and it was a world I knew nothing about until about 2007, but it's an extremely complex world. But the first challenge that you've got is that your customers, of course, haven't chosen to be there. They've been directed in by a court, and they're with you because they're under sentence. So actually getting the relationship and the value out of that whole thing in order to get people to make the decision to stop offending, it is quite a skilled job. So what we're going to do is we're just going to show you about a minute's film that perhaps explains how we do this.
When I got out of prison, I realised that the probation service was there to help support me and not just, supervise my punishment. So I took opportunity of all the support that was out there. I was helped to get a job.
I started engaging with my probation officer, taking on the courses that were on offer.
There is a lot to offer, especially in drug and alcohol as well. All them areas that they are on offer by the probation, and they do support in every aspect in that avenue.
Now, very quick snapshot. Those 3 people who defended not only were deriving value and changing their lives because of the work that we do in probation, but they were also now moving on to provide, in turn, those services to other offenders. It may surprise you to know that we employ quite a substantial number of people who've offended who then go on to reform, and they make very powerful advocates and mentors for those who are going through the experience. You wouldn't expect us to employ somebody to do the sort of jobs that we do if we didn't have experience of doing it. Well, getting an offender to reform, you actually really need to get some people who've also got experience of reforming. So those 3 all operate as offender mentors, in fact, in the Merseyside CRC, as you might have detected from the accent. So let's just talk about what it is we're actually doing and how we're doing it. Probation is actually one of the oldest of the public services. It's over 100 years old, and it's had a mixed history of investments in infrastructure. Like any big public service, one is to some extent subject to the vagaries of whatever ministers want, and therefore you're thinking in 3, 4, 5-year chunks. Well, it's now fixed terms. So you don't really get that very long-term continuity of approach that you get in the private sector. And it was one of the things I most noticed when I moved from the private sector to the public sector was you have to think in small chunks. The effect that's had on probation is that systems, process renewal, all of those things that we would see as our expertise are less well developed than perhaps they would be if it had been one continuous owner over those 100 years. So in order to put together the solution that we're delivering, we had to look at a few things. There were some basic things like, around the cost of estates, rationalisation, getting officers that are fit for purpose, making sure they're in the right places, all of those good things. The second was a new IT system which would support new business processes. Because of the way in which we've designed our approach, we wanted to be able to have one system that everyone in that system would use, including the offenders themselves and our partners. So a nice underpinning IT system that matches the business operating model. But the biggest and most complex part of the bid was actually the design of the operating model itself. And this is a subtly but noticeably different way of delivering probation services. It's a proprietary operating model that was developed by our in-house professional probation experts, and it's called Interchange. The approach that we use in Interchange is sufficiently flexible and is backed up by a huge amount of external research that we start to see its application not only in our probation markets, but as Dougie referred earlier, this approach applies equally well in our learning and employment market and in some parts of our health markets. So we've actually developed something that has got real intellectual capital and that is reusable. We also looked at the differences between what we're doing and what was happening 12 months ago. And really, you might think that if somebody, for example, is released from prison and they're serving a life sentence or whatever, you might think that they just sort of go off and do their own thing. They would be under supervision for the rest of their lives when they come out of prison. Now, in order to meaningfully get them contributing, get them back into employment, get them off any substances they may be addicted to, is a continuous and long-term piece of work. And using this type of a model, what we're doing is that we're not only delivering those interventions that Dougie referred to earlier, the specific activities that help people reform, but you're also doing it in a context that makes sure that they understand that the most successful way to do that is to integrate back into their communities. And to integrate into a community, not only do you not reoffend, you have to contribute. So there's a philosophy behind this. It's actually it's common sense, but it's quite difficult because it does involve the joining up of quite a lot of public services underpinned by a big amount of behavioural change. What probation staff are expert at is behavioural change. So we bring all of that together in Interchange. So what difference does it make? This is an aggregated set of numbers, but they are very real. We are responsible for the management of about 35,000 offenders per annum across our 5 CRCs at any one time. The Interchange model basically involves supervision, well that's meeting people face to face on a regular basis, case management, which is fundamentally determining with them what they will do, keeping assessments going, making sure that their risk factors aren't escalating, doing the technical part of the job. You then diagnose with them what will start to address the factors that contribute to their offending behaviours, and they are quite technical cognitive behavioural therapy type programmes and also lower level anger management, avoidance of alcohol, all of those good things. So that's the behavioural stuff. And we have taken some considerable learning from the health market where in our particular implementation that bundle of services is highly personalised to an individual offender's needs. That's quite an advanced way of approaching it. It has two benefits. The effectiveness of the interventions increases, and actually over time the cost decreases, so you get a double good hit. So if we did what we're doing today before you implement the new way of doing things, of 35,000, 16,500 would stop offending. After you've put in a new model, 19,100 will stop offending. So actually, we're probably making a difference of, about 15-20% improvement on the status quo. If you think that every single one of those people, those additional people that we can get to desist, the estimated cost to the state and to victims that can be calculated, because often the cost is incalculable, of course, it's round about £200,000 each one. So it's quite a big number, actually, when you take that extra couple of thousand people. So the economics of doing this are unarguable, and it is that gap that is the payment by results element of this contract. So we're paid to do the 16,500 desisting, and we're paid to deliver service to 35,000 offenders, and then we're paid more if we get it from 16,500 to 19,100. And that's PBR. I just want to sort of start to pull together some of the things that Dougie was talking about how does this fit across our three main business areas in frontline services. We've got a significant geographical presence that has been acquired with the 5 community rehabilitation companies. And you will see there that we've got about 130 individual locations that we now occupy. And you'll see there the justice officers are represented. There's a swathe across the northwest over to the east side, and then a good concentration around the south coast in Hampshire. If we then look at where our healthcare businesses are, you will see once again good presence in the northwest, something much further north, and then a scattering throughout the rest of the country, because the healthcare business is of course a national business. We then add on to that our learning and employment business locations, very heavily focused again in the north. And you can start to see that we've got considerable physical presence in these markets now. In all, we occupy round about 200 distinct locations in our own right, and we then have access to all of our partner locations. Now, this is just an example. On the right-hand side are some of the justice partners, and on the left-hand side are some of the partners in our learning and skills businesses. Now, when you add on our supply chain locations, you're increasing the footprint exponentially. The other thing that comes with this is that we've got about 4,000 people, of whom a very large percentage are very highly skilled. So, for example, in my world, in probation, we have hundreds of qualified staff, probation service officers and probation officers. They are of at least graduate level standard, and they're all specially trained in things like cognitive behavioural therapy delivery. So, the real specialisations across all of those locations with all of those partners. So we think that doing these types of services, and the services written in red are the ones that we are delivering today from across those businesses. So they range from delivering services in support of victims of domestic abuse. We deliver work program services, CV preparation. We already deliver absolutely hundreds of apprenticeship schemes through our skills business. We do integrated offender management, working with the police and working with local authorities to actually focus on very difficult cases. We run parenting support programs to actually start to realign people's expectations around fitting into their families. So all of those services written in red are there, they're today, and they're delivered by hugely skilled individuals who are our employees. The services written in black are things that we could move into tomorrow because we have the skills to do them, and those really represent some of the detail behind the interventions that Dougie was talking about in available markets earlier. So we do see possibilities around, for example, Job Centre Plus coming to market, but we also see things like secondary care. Community health is incredibly interesting for us because if you look at the work programme and you look at the probation caseload, the percentage of those customers who have, for example, mental health problems or have ongoing drug addiction or alcohol addiction problems is really, really high. Now, we're already delivering drug and alcohol addiction support services up in Rochdale. This type of move into community health services, community mental health, hugely complementary. And of course, we can do it. So that really just brings me to just a few thoughts for you. We think we're in a very unusual position to deliver geographically strong, place-based and city-based services. We think that the capability and the infrastructure that we've developed over the last 3 years has put us into a very unusual position compared with our competition, and a very strong one. And we've got good margin businesses here with some considerable upside around the PBR side. So I hope Ian gave you some indications that the direction of travel for outsourcing in public sector markets is indeed there. And that concludes everything I've got to say. Thank you.